Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Inside Boxing Daily. I am your host and sole host for this evening, Jeremiah Preisser. I want to welcome everybody in. Again, I want to appreciate everybody who tunes in week in and week out. Again, I'm just thankful for however many listens we get. I never expected I'd have this many people, tune in every night just to listen to me and Mike chat about boxing. I wanted to tell you guys, we're brought to you by BetDSI. You sign up, use the code, you get a deal and whatnot. We're also brought to you by Seat Giant. So if you guys plan on attending any sporting events, just go to the website, enter TGT, and you also get a little something off that. And we're also brought to you by the Retired Boxers Foundation, which is, run by Jackie Richardson and Alex Ramos. They do a good job. It's always nice when people actually look out for retired fighters because there are just, so few things that are actually being done for these guys. But yeah, let's get right to the news. It's going to be a bit of a short show. Not a whole lot going on. But I suspect that things are going to start to shape up here pretty soon. It seems like, this is about the time that we get, some of the bigger fights, but then things start to materialize near the end of the year. So hopefully we can get stuff like that done, and then we don't have to complain as much. Anyways, the most recent news I saw was Tyson Fury saying that the rematch with Deontay Wilder is not signed. Fury claims that Wilder is simply saying that just to piggyback off of his fame. If that's true, I mean, it's really a tactic that a lot of promoters use. I mean, you look at guys like Bob Arum and, they'll tell you that they're looking at so-and-so next, and it's a big name, and people start to get excited about it. But, of course, if you've been following boxing long enough, you start to, you become immune to the BS, and you don't really hold your breath because you never know in this game. So, the fact that it's not signed, I mean, it really doesn't surprise me anyways. There had been talk. What seemed to be common knowledge was that Deontay Wilder was fighting Brazil, a quote-unquote mandatory. I guess it really was the mandatory, but, it's still silly. And then, he's fighting Luis Ortiz in the rematch. And then after that, it seemed as if Adam Konacki was next in line for a shot. And Tyson Fury's, I think he's even alluded to the fact that Wilder, without directly saying it, but it just seems like he's alluding to the fact that Wilder's going to be busy for a little while, because Fury himself, and we talked about this on the show, but Fury himself had indicated that he planned on, taking like 3 more fights before the year was over. And, I would be all for that. I mean, a guy fighting, 4 times in a year as a heavyweight, especially one who's ranked very highly, it's just not something you see very much. And I think in Fury's case, it's something that you need to do. Again, I don't know where he's, he seems to be in a better place mentally. He's good interview and he's good talk. He's the best personality in the division. But he's just one of those guys you don't want sitting idle. When you have mental health issues, again, I'm not that familiar with this sort of stuff, but it seems as if the more you stay idle, the more prone you are to these sorts of things. And so, yes, keeping him active is a good thing. So if he fights, 3 more Tom Schwarz type fighters, until he gets a Deontay Wilder rematch, I'm not going to be terribly upset because the Wilder rematch is really, what we see, really what we want to see with Anthony Joshua being upset. I mean, it's kind of like the rematch is the go-to fight. Hopefully it gets done. Hopefully Fury's a man of his word and he does fight 3 more times this year. But, yeah, the rematch not being signed, I'm not particularly surprised by that. Neither should you. I also saw that Oscar Valdez, the featherweight, highly rated featherweight, he is targeting Carl Frampton in the fall or the winter. I think that's a damn good fight, and of course it makes a lot of sense with Frank Warren and Bob Arum shaking hands and doing some promotional stuff side by side. I think it's a good fight. it's tough to say what Frampton has. I mean, he did fight Josh Warrington. I do think Josh Warrington is a good featherweight, but to me, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but to me, it seems as if Frampton is on the downside. I mean, to me, it seems like a prime Frampton should not lose to Warrington, and maybe I'm still underestimating Warrington, but he just doesn't look like a guy. And of course, it's not all about skills, of course, but he just looks like a guy who shouldn't be able to contend. Well, at least beat. He's not a guy who looks like he should be able to beat the guy who fought Leo Santa Cruz in the first fight. I mean, to me, Frampton is a highly skilled operator. I don't know what's been going on. I mean, he's had these up and down performances. I don't know if he's been struggling with weight or, exactly what it is, or maybe, the Santa Cruz fights took a little bit out of him and, he's past his best now. Again, people age differently, so it's, it's hard to say exactly what's going on there. But I like the fight. If it comes off, I think Valdez looked pretty sharp in his last outing. You could see that he's working on his boxing ability a little bit more. And I think for the longevity of his career, that's the right move to make. He's getting in these scraps with guys, and he's making things a bit tougher on himself. But it's still, it remains to be seen whether or not he can box. Because we saw what he did against was Jason Sanchez. And again, he looked good, but what happens if a guy like Carl Frampton can time him a little bit? Valdez can't quite use his jab as much as he did against Sanchez. So, I'm wondering if he can be drawn into another fight. And to be honest with you, Valdez, I think he's a good featherweight. I'm just he looks like one of those guys who's susceptible to a loss. But of course, if the best guys were fighting the best, maybe we'd get some answers there. But I like that fight. I think it's a good one. And at this juncture, I personally think that it's a pick'em fight. All right. And another thing, we'd actually talked about this last night. We had some question marks as to whether or not the alphabet trinkets were going to be broken up with Andy Ruiz holding them, because Tyson Fury had also indicated that, that he might be fighting for the WBO trinket against Tom Schwarz. It doesn't look like that's going to be the case. I guess the WBO president had said that, no need to worry. That belt, at least the WBO belt, is going to be available when Anthony Joshua and Andy Ruiz get it on again. So I suppose that puts something to rest. Again, I never would be surprised if the WBO went back on their word, or if, the WBA and WBC decided to strip them, because of Al Heyman's influence. Again, never say never in this game. But at least in one aspect, at least for the WBO trinket, it seems as if we're safe for now. All right. And again, I wasn't going to go with a whole lot here, but on this day was actually a fight that I attended. I did with my family. And it was, not surprisingly, for the WBO trinket as well. This was Miguel Cotto against Joshua Clottey at Madison Square Garden. I think this was back in 2007, if I'm not mistaken. And this was I believe this was not right after, but I think it was the, second fight after. Again, I'm not box wrecking this stuff, but I believe it was the fight right after Michael Jennings. So I believe he took the loss to Antonio Margarito, beat Michael Jennings for the vacant trinket, and then fought Joshua Clottey at Madison Square Garden. Now, I know this isn't one of those fights that you hear often, and it's not as if it was a classic in any sense, but it was a fight between two top welterweights. Clottey was one of those guys that I actually really liked. I mean, he was somebody, what was the, I'm trying to think of the sports channels that my father used to have on cable. And there was one dedicated to New York, and you would see some of these some of his old contests on there, and he looked good. I mean, I liked his style. Cotto, of course, was, obviously a top welterweight himself. And, let's see if I can remember the fight that clearly, I remember the fight, Miguel Cotto, came out sticking behind the jab, and he actually knocked Joshua Clottey down. And, of course, Clottey was incredibly strong physically. He always looked like he was in incredible shape. He put up that tight guard, and, just about nobody was able to bust through it. And you could tell. I mean, just look at the performances comparatively from like Gianluca Bronco, who also fought behind a high guard, and Joshua Clottey. I mean, Cotto just beat on Bronco, and Bronco ended up checking out because he hurt his arm. Just too many left hooks sustained to his right arm, and he just checked out. Clottey, on the other hand, was able to take out everything that Cotto dished. Again, he did get knocked down in the first round, but that was much more a product of timing and balance than anything. Clottey was obviously not hurt, and when he got up, you could see that. Even Miguel Cotto could see that. It's not as if there was, any weebling or wobbling that was going around. Clottey just got caught at the right time and got dropped. But yeah, he was incredibly strong. I mean, I liked his style. He didn't move his head as much as I would have liked, but he'd come at you, high guard. He had that, he was Ghanaian, so stylistically he was very similar to Ike Corte. He threw a jab in a very similar manner. He didn't really put a lot behind the right hand, but he had good pop, had good hand speed. Again, incredible physical strength. I mean, this is a guy who fought Antonio Margarito, and Margarito at the time threw, 1,677 punches against Joshua Clottey, and Clottey took a ton of them on the arms. And, not once was he stunned, not once was he hurt, not once did he, wiggle his arms around to indicate that he was, they were getting tired because of the punishment. And, there are question marks. Again, there's no proof, but, there are question marks as to how long Antonio Margarito was using, the hardening of the cast. So, if he was using it against Clottey, and Clottey was taking a record number of punches, largely on the arms, and still barely budging, I mean, that just tells you. I mean, the guy was almost inhuman in that regard. I mean, he was incredibly tough. I don't ever recall seeing him stunned, ever. I mean, there might have been a time real early in his career that I'm not aware of, but I saw quite a few of his early fights that I never recall him taking a shot on the chin and being damaged. I mean, even against Pacquiao. Pacquiao threw, 1,200-1,300 punches himself, and, Clottey took a good number of those, and again, was not hurt at all. It was an odd performance, but, not hurt at all. So, Cotto is up against a formidable foe here, and you see from Clottey's career as well. It's like he beat up Zab Judah, who was his typical self, and he was, he was real competitive in the early going, but then, Clottey just kept coming forward, jabbing, breaking him down, didn't quite get a satisfactory stoppage, but did get the win. And I also thought it was weird, too, that Clottey, I mean, he looked like he was beating Antonio Margarito pretty clearly through the first 4 rounds. And then all of a sudden, he claimed an injury, and I also heard that injury wasn't real. So I don't know what happened there, but it looked as if that was a winnable fight for him, but, just never got the job done. But in this fight, again, Cotto was working behind the jab. He couldn't muscle through Joshua Clottey, who looked stronger. It was one of those things where, to me, when I was watching live at Madison Square Garden, and, it was reinforced when I went back and watched the tape, it looked like Cotto was the busier of the two, and Clottey was the sharper of the two, where it became one of those arguments. It's like, what do you prefer? Do you like quantity or do you like quality? And from what I saw, initially, the decision to me, I didn't really make any fuss about it either way. I thought it was a close fight and it could have gone either way. Upon rewatching it, I had Clottey edging it, but again, I still saw the fight as being able to go either way without much fuss at all. So it's not anything that I make a stink about. But I was just highly impressed with, Cotto was trying to make a comeback after that, that really heavy-handed defeat, at the hands of Antonio Margarito, and he looked a little timid to me. Again, he still looked as if he was confident in his ability, but he looked just slightly timid in there, just because maybe Clottey sort of represented something like Antonio Margarito again, where he wasn't a volume puncher, but Cotto, his power wasn't doing the trick there, so I think maybe it was a little discouraging. But yeah, Clottey took everything that Cotto had and didn't really budge. And when he decided to unleash, typically he was pretty accurate. He seemed a little bit sharper. His punches seemed to do more damage overall than Cotto's did. And that's kind of what I read from the fight, just in totality, that Clottey was just a bit sharper, just a bit quicker, a bit stronger, and he looked a bit more like the boss in there. But again, it could have gone either way. It was a damn good fight. Clottey to me is one of those guys who could have been his generation's Ike Corte. Again, he had the odd performance against Pacquiao and Antonio Margarito. And actually, when he opened up against Pacquiao, he didn't look that bad. Again, that was... I don't know if they were paying him, side money to put in these lame duck performances or what exactly was the case. But, against Margarito and Cotto or Pacquiao, I don't know. I mean, the puzzle didn't really fit together in my eyes. I mean, I was just wondering what the hell was going on. But when you see when he was fighting these guys, I mean, and this is perspective as well. I mean, had he got the decision over Cotto, well, that's a big win on his resume. Zab Judah's a solid win on his resume. Had he been able to fight consistently against Margarito, I mean, this is a guy who could have really gone on to do big things and get even bigger fights. I mean, the Pacquiao one was a good payday, and, I'm sure he's still living well because of it, but it was just one of those things. Like, had he really put it all together, he really could have been a tough test for years and years. Not only that, he had bouts of inactivity. Again, I'm not sure why. I've never talked to the guy. I'm not sure. Maybe I can get him on and do some in-depth interview. But yeah, Cotto himself, he was declared the victor. Tough night out. Ended up going on and doing bigger and better things himself. I mean, ended up having himself a damn good career. Being competitive with the likes of Pacquiao and Mayweather and beating Margarito in the rematch and beating Shane Mosley and becoming the 160-pound champ, by beating Sergio Martinez. The guy ended up being... he ended up making himself one of the greater Puerto Ricans to ever do it. I'm a little cautious with putting his name at the very top, just because at 147, which I thought was his best weight class, I'd probably favor Felix Trinidad to beat him. Trinidad, I think, was just a bit too big, bit too powerful, long. Carlos Ortiz, to me, I think is number one. Him or Wilfred Benitez. So to me, it goes something like Benitez or Carlos Ortiz, and then you also have Wilfredo Gomez. You've also got, Tito Trinidad, and Hector Camacho, in my opinion, was very, very good at his best, especially at 130, 135. Looked like a superb boxer. So again, it's tough to say, because Cotto... he obviously showed that he was a damn good fighter by being competitive with his generation's elite. So you can't take that away from him. I just get a little cautious with all the 4-division champion stuff that a lot of people throw out. He really wasn't the champion in any division but 160. And of course, Sergio Martinez was, obviously on the downside. He deserves credit. Again, I'm not trying to take everything away from him. I'm not. I think that Cotto is a damn good fighter. I enjoyed watching him fight all the way. I'm just saying, in the grand scheme of things, we got to be a little cautious with our, he's the first 4-division Puerto Rican champion. Again, he was a title holder and not the champion. There is a distinction there. But the fact that he was even able to be competitive in, that 20-pound variance shows you that He's deserving of many of the accolades that he's gotten. And, I wouldn't be surprised if he makes it in the Hall of Fame. I think at this juncture he's probably a shoo-in. If I was on the voting panel, I don't know. But he's a damn good fighter. And this was a rock-solid win. I think it's one of his more underrated wins because when Clottey actually showed up, he was a force to be reckoned with. Anyways, that's all for the show. I hope you enjoyed my assessment of the latter especially. I enjoyed watching both of those guys fight. And as always, we're brought to you by BetDSI, Seat Giants, Retired Boxers Foundation. Just check out the website. We've got tons of podcasts, tons of boxing material up every day. And I thank you guys just for tuning in. So for Jeremiah Preisser, I'm your host for tonight. Have a good one.